Senator Joe Manchin is essentially trying to swing his Johnson around as some sort of tough guy who's going to stand in the way of Congress getting anything substantive done during Biden's administration. In reality, he's just another corrupt politician who's looking to appease his donors and basically repackage it as being a principled politician who wants to avoid the polar opposites of the parties. Now, he's been feuding with progressives like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It started about a week ago where he started attacking progressives within the Democratic Party who have pushed for progressive policy proposals, who have aligned themselves with Black Lives Matter. And so he had written, defund the police, defund my butt, because he's a child. I'm a proud West Virginia Democrat. We are the party of working men and women. We want to protect Americans' jobs and healthcare, except he never does. We do have some crazy socialist, we don't have some crazy socialist agenda. We do not believe in defunding the police. And so AOC tweeted that image of her giving him the death stare. And in response to that, he later cried about it to the New York Times saying, I guess she put the dagger stare on me. I don't know the young lady, I really don't. I never met her. I'm understanding she's not that active with her bills or in committee. She's more active on Twitter than anything else. Okay. So I absolutely disagree with that. But nonetheless, I'm gonna move on to a recent interview that he had with the New York Times because he's continuing this messaging of how he's really gonna stand up to the party. Even if the two Senate runoff races in Georgia lead to Democratic wins, he will be the cop that stops any type of policy that Republicans might dislike. He doesn't say it in so many words, but that is essentially what he's implying. So he says in regard to what he plans to do for his corporate donors, he doesn't say it that way, but that's what this is about. The most conservative member of his party in the Senate, as the most conservative member of the party in the Senate, he has a message for fellow Democrats hoping to capture the majority and quickly begin muscling through legislation to bring about sweeping liberal change. Not on his watch. Great, okay, so that's wonderful. He also pretends to be absolutely delusional enough to think that the Democratic Party has been taken over by Marxists. He says, I just would hope that people would start looking at the person that they're voting for and not the party they belong to. A Democrat who's a moderate conservative like myself is much needed to bring other people to that moderate position. And let's just talk about why he's so quote unquote moderate. You look at his top donors, and this is from 2015 to 2020. The top industries that have donated money to Joe Manchin include the real estate industry. You have Goldman Sachs as one of his top donors, specific donors, but you have the securities and investment industry essentially serving as his absolute top donor. And it's just unsurprising to me that he's going to go along with what his donors want. But of course, he's got to do positive PR for himself. He's got to repackage it as something better because people aren't going to like that he's a corrupt politician. So instead, he's branding himself as this reasonable politician who's going to prevent the floodgates of progressivism from opening in this country.
Yeah, so Manchin and the media are in hog heaven because the corporate media loves bipartisanship because it leads to protecting the status quo, keeping the powerful in their current positions, changing almost nothing, more tax cuts for the wealthy. So that's why the mainstream media has what they call a centrist bias. It's not actually the center of the country, it's the center of Washington, which is the center of power. So Manchin serves that power, and so does the media. So they're beside themselves with joy. Now, none of the articles, by the way, corrected him. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is incredibly active in committee. She's so active in committee that a lot of the moderate or centrist or corporate Democrats complain about it all the time. Like, oh my God, she's supposed to be a backbencher. It's her first term. What's she doing? Why is she so active? Why does she speak out so much? And she does an amazing job. So it's totally not true. Then he says, and this is really interesting. He says, well, she hasn't produced much in the form of bills. Well, there he's a little bit right because she made a mistake. She made the mistake of listening to corporate Democrats like Manchin and Nancy Pelosi. They told her, don't try to introduce Green New Deal. Don't try to introduce Medicare for all. And out of respect, she listened to them. And now they're using it against her. Never ever agree with corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans. They'll only use it against you later. Now, if they actually agree with you on policy, great, I'm happy to have that, right? But if you go in their direction, it's a trap. So now, Manchin, from his perspective, now get ready to get mad at me for a second, is doing something that's perfectly rational. That's it, you support Manchin and you're a tangent. Okay, no, hear me out.
You better communicate this clearly, homeboy, okay?
So from his perspective, the system is what it is. How are you gonna win if you don't have tons of donor money? You knucklehead progressives don't get it. I have to serve Goldman Sachs. I have to serve coal and fossil fuel companies because otherwise I'm less likely to win. In this current system, there is truth to that. Now, we're in the middle of changing it. That's why now there's 10 Justice Democrats in Congress, etc. So I'm gonna get to the giant problem with this line of thinking in a second, but he's thinking that. That's why he actually came on this program. We had an interview and I showed him that his top donor was a fossil fuel company. And he seemed to be, and then he helped to pass an amendment that would cover up their toxic sludge. And he said, Cenk, I don't even know that they're my top donor. He said that on the Young Turks. He doesn't know who his top donor is. Now that's hilarious. That's of course not true. Every politician is perfectly aware of almost all of their donors, let alone their top donor. So he says, well, from my perspective, I gotta do it. I gotta serve the corrupt to get the money to win. And in West Virginia, I gotta be conservative. I gotta be for guns and the Bible, etc. Now, half of that is true. In West Virginia is not New York, California, Hawaii, or Rhode Island. Yes, I understand why you'd have to have a more pro-gun rights position in West Virginia. We're practical, we understand that. We might not like it, but we understand it. On the corruption, he's both right, because that is the current system, and totally wrong. See, the right way to approach that is, and here's what I'm going to do to change it. I gotta do this for now, but I'm then going to do X, Y, and Z to make sure we get to a non-corrupt system. But he doesn't do that. Instead, he swims in the corruption and he celebrates it. He's like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. This is the moderate position is Goldman Sachs is awesome. The moderate position is that West Virginians love big bankers. Really, really? And of course, the mainstream media is complicit with Manchin, so no one ever asks him, well, you have enormously pro-banker positions. Really, is that what the voters of West Virginia, who are the most populous in the whole country, are pro-Goldman Sachs? No, of course not. What they're all winking but never telling their audience or their readers is, hey, you know what? Goldman Sachs owns Joe Manchin, and so do all of his donors. And the people of West Virginia do not want that. And by the way, we're gonna do great damage to the Democratic brand because we're gonna tell every other Democrat, don't call out Joe Manchin for being owned by Goldman Sachs because that would be against your colleague. But golly gee, you caught a tough break here. That means you also can't call out any Republican. So, because if you say the Republicans are taking money from Goldman Sachs, that means you also got to call out Manchin for taking money from Goldman Sachs, and we can't do that. We have to protect Manchin at all costs. So now the corruption is solidified and here to stay forever. That's the game that's being played. So I, as always, I like to think, have a constructive solution. Joe Manchin is going around and the media is celebrating. I'm the one vote that could side with the Republicans and block anything in the Senate, even if the Democrats win the 2 Georgia seats. I'm the most important person. And the media is like, bravo, Manchin, you are the most important person. Okay, here's a proposal. Bernie Sanders can also block any bill. It only takes one Democratic senator to block a bill.
It's true.
Oh, nobody ever thought of that, huh? That's weird. Now, if Bernie Sanders blocks a bill though, all of mainstream media will come out, this guy, terrible guy, blocking the bill that they need. When Manchin does it, they're like, bravo, bipartisanship. That way nothing got done until you agreed with the Republicans. Great job, Joe Manchin. Bernie Sanders blocks a bill. These progressives, they're not practical. They're not practical. You have to give Mitch McConnell everything he wants, otherwise you're not being practical. So I say to Bernie Sanders and every other progressive in Congress, block the goddamn bills. Block the bills. This is called politics. If Manchin says, I'm gonna play politics, I'm gonna take all the corrupt money and I'm gonna do their bidding, why don't you play politics and go, I'm not gonna let you. And I don't give a goddamn that you call yourself my colleague. No corrupt guy who works for Goldman Sachs is my colleague that I have to defer to because he'd like to make a deal with Mitch McConnell that's gonna rob the rest of us blind. No deal. Vote no on every terrible bill, which will be almost all of them. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.